All right, so we have Will Koning on, who is a dear friend of mine. Welcome to the show, Will.
Thanks for having me, Mikey.
Short intro. Will is new now as a co-founder at Merit,
That's correct.
which we'll be talking about later.
Yeah.
Former founder of SaaS Leads, which we'll also be talking about, and has vast experience in the sales world, like myself, so we share that in common, as well as the entrepreneurship. But we also share some more like spiritual journeys. We're going to be talking about ayahuasca and a few things like that. But I know you were comfortable talking about some of the darker moments in your life, Will. So I thought we could kick off. Will and I have been spending the day together today. So we've actually been together since like 9 a.m.
It's been a great
coffee.
day, hasn't it? Yeah, really good. Yeah.
But yeah, you were talking earlier about this really defining moment of your life where you'd just been fired from a job. You're at Old Street Roundabout. So maybe we can kick off the show from there.
Yes. So I was in this job for like 3 months, and I'd just been fired from a previous job as well. So, and then I get a tap on the shoulder, taken down to an office, and yeah, this isn't working out. So been fired twice in 3 months.
Wow.
And it was near Wall Street. I was walking on the Wall Street roundabout, for those that know where that is, where it's like that concrete jungle, etc. And I just remember sitting there and I was like, what do I do now? Like, what on earth? Like, I didn't know where to go. I didn't want to go home. I was stuck. And I made a conscious decision there and then to start my own business. And I phoned up my mum, and I was the first to tell her. I said, Mum, I'm starting my own business. You need to come and pick me up and take me home because I've now got no money. So yeah, that was the start, and that was the beginning of what was SaaS Leads, and that's where we met when all that started happening, and that's where the story began.
So I imagine most people, after they've been fired from 2 jobs, they're not going to be like, hey, I'm going to start my own business. So like, why did you make that decision?
Well, I think in both situations, I thought I was right and they were wrong. And, I think that obviously sounds incredibly arrogant, as you say it like that, right? So I better put my money where the mouth is, was the feeling. I felt that I had so much to offer the world, and the construction which I was finding myself in, be it, having managers or adhering to other people's rules, just never really fit with me, ever, right? Like, I always thought I knew best, but I was cocky, so arrogant, but I went for it nonetheless. And it was that drive to want to do something better for myself, I think. Yeah. I deserved better.
All right, and then so you start SaaS Leads. Obviously, I know that whole journey because, as you said, I met you when you were pretty much starting it. Yeah. But yeah, try and run us through that, which I know is a long period of your life, but you can do it in less than 5 minutes.
Obviously, my background's in sales. I'm a sales guy. So what I did was I didn't have any ideas really at the time. I had this concept of what was an outsourced sales agency called SaaS Leads. I'd already registered the domain, so there was kind of something happening in the background, not much. And, at the end of the day, as a sales guy, what can you offer? Well, you can offer to do sales services. And in that case, it was lead generation. I'd been really interested in what was going on in the sales development space. So I thought, right, screw it. I'm going to become an SDR consultancy, essentially, and do lead gen. That's how I started. And within 4 months, I got my first customer. I remember earning my first bit of money, £2,700 in my bank account. I bought a pizza, a beer, a laptop, and then didn't spend any more money for another 3 months whilst I started building up the business. Thank God for my mum putting me up, And and then so that was going okay. We were obviously doing some work together at that point, and then COVID hit. And you were right there, actually. You were there, and then all the contracts just pulled out, didn't they? That day one of Q2 2020 was COVID, right? Yeah. And that was obviously brutal. Because my first business had effectively died, completely out of my control. But it didn't die, it went dormant, right? And as the tech sector started to kind of pick back up, it was the first sector to pick back up. These companies are starting to come back to me and saying, hey, can you do this outsourced lead gen stuff? And I thought, actually, that's not really for me, But I do know a bunch of kids that would be really good at this through introductions, etc. And they're like, oh, no, we can't train them. So I'd had this idea anyway, but and that's how I founded the SaaS Leads Academy, whereby I would take on, graduates typically for 3 months, train them up, make them do like outsource lead gen.
Yeah.
And if they were good, at the end of the 3 months, they get a job with the company that we were working with. And that was really successful in many respects. Obviously, there was a lot of problems with it because it failed, but it was a success because I put about 250 people into full-time work during COVID when no one else could help them because you couldn't even get a job pulling pints, right, for COVID reasons. So I'm incredibly proud of what I achieved there. Unfortunately, it failed. Professionally, the hardest experience of my life. Happy to talk about that further. But that essentially, what happened? Yeah, it failed. But what I've done now is I had to take my licks, went on to being a chief commercial officer in a technology company, which was a redemption, got that to profitability essentially. And now I'm starting Merit. So that's the journey in a nutshell from at least a professional standpoint.
Going back to the SaaS leads thing, I remember you having a lot of success, but me watching from the sidelines and knowing you, I remember in my mind thinking he's trying to grow it too quickly. You were hiring loads, you were getting investors, you were getting loads of people. Yes. Do you think that's like a fair assessment, like looking back at it?
It was one of the core mistakes that I made. But you got to understand in the context of what was going on, right? Like we were in this crazy SaaS bubble that is now kind of exploded, right? And, SaaS leads was kind of like the canary in the coal mine for what we've all experienced in the tech sector. And I absolutely grew it too quickly. Totally on me. Didn't really, I look back now, I'm like, oh my God, hindsight's 2020, right?
Yeah.
But that was one of the core reasons why it failed. But when you actually put in the context of what I was trying to achieve, we weren't probably growing fast enough. So, you could argue both ways, but there was also some fundamental other reasons why SaaS leads failed. Yeah.
Well, because obviously I'm sure, most of the people that listen to this podcast won't run their own business, but there's probably quite a few who are, could have been salespeople like us, or they work in HR, or they're interior designers or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And maybe they think, I do want to start my own business one day. What are some of the mistakes that you made that they could learn from?
Number one, if you're going to have to work with people, make sure you bring on the right people. I failed at that. That was my biggest mistake. So if you need people, bring on the right people. Not all the people. That was also a mistake.
Yeah.
Bring on the right people. I cannot really express to you how painful it can be if you have the wrong people in the wrong seats.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And then obviously we've spoken about this a lot on the show before, that when you go through that as an entrepreneur, even in business in general, obviously it can have like a negative effect on your personal life as well. So I imagine you were like struggling a lot during that period.
Yeah. So during the failure of SaaS leads, like I knew I was in trouble first. Yeah. Right, and CEOs tend to you should know if you're doing your job properly. I knew we were in trouble big time. My co-founder and I had fallen out, and I was doing a lot of stress there. I was trying to be sued for about £800,000, which was really, really unfair. And so that was an incredible amount of stress. And then at the same time, I knew the business was failing, and I just remember seeing this email come out from Y Combinator saying, all founders extend your runways, and all my businesses were working with founders. So, I just knew we were screwed. And then at the same time, I had a payroll of about 250 grand. So it was incredibly stressful for a bootstrap business. And that had a massive, and I had to do layoffs. I had to cut everyone lost their jobs. And, I didn't take salary for 3 months, and they were all the right calls given the situation. I made I'm very proud of the calls that I made, the very difficult, challenging decisions that I had to make. And what people don't understand when you're in a failing business is there's a lot of legalities that you have, and very kind of like moral quandaries you have to navigate. It's not as simple as just tell the truth. It's not. A really great case in point is like, if you tell a customer that you're going to fail and you're going under, you could technically be breaking certain rules. So you have to really like figure out how to navigate all of that whilst trying to do the right ethically moral thing. And that took a massive impact on my mental health, to the point that I wasn't suicidal. That's not what I was. But because my brain is like very active, neurodiverse ADHD type, my brain solves for problems, right? Kind of an entrepreneurial thing, right? We solve problems. And my brain was solving the problem that I was in by saying, hey, you should just kill yourself. That sucked. It was so hard. It was so horrible. And, suddenly you've gone from like this amazing, successful, aspirational CEO to you're the bastard that's laid off X amount of people. I had my integrity put into question around things like I was accused of being racist, which is, anyone that knows me, was just the most laughable thing. Being accused of being all these things rather than, it was just really, really hard. So my integrity had been put into question by people that I cared about deeply, and I was deeply hurt, and I was very lost. I was very lost. So my brain was trying to solutionize itself, but it'd gone a bit broken. Yeah. It's so difficult to express the level of hurt that was going on, because it was my baby, and you know how much I put into to just even get it off the ground, and the why I do what I do, right? It's not about making money. So, to have all of that put into question by people that, frankly, I loved, was really, really, really hurting. It hurt so much. So anyway, without wishing to be too victimy about it, I took ownership and accountability of the situation, and after not taking any pay for 3 months and effectively shutting the business, I shut the business down. I had to. I really made sure that I could. What's the word? I really wanted to make sure that I would look after me now. It was now time to look after me, because nothing's worth those thoughts. Nothing is worth it. It's so intrusive. They're so hurt. It's horrible. So I took accountability of the situation, and luckily my girlfriend Lauren, she got me in touch with a therapist. And so whilst I was navigating the practical elements of getting a job and sorting all that out and going back to some kind of normal life, I've also spent the last year and a half in understanding me from in a deeper way through things like therapy and stuff like that. And so it's been like a really, really interesting journey of self-discovery the last 4 years, as much as anything else, So
So you mentioned that to me earlier as well, which I thought was interesting, which is like being an entrepreneur, starting a business is basically, people don't realize you're going to start a journey of self-discovery, which I don't think I've heard anyone use those words before. So like, why'd you say that?
Yeah. So like in the world of entrepreneurship, you are putting your full self into it, right?
Yeah.
As you have to put your full self into this, especially if you're a really like kind of mission-driven business. Like for us, we want to help people, right? That's like the high level thing. You really end up putting yourself out there in the truest and rawest way, right?
Yeah.
And often, as you go through and you make a lot of mistakes, you often don't like what you see, and it comes back at you, right? It comes back at you, and so what you learn so much about yourself, and because you have to take ownership and accountability, there's very, very little place to hide, right? And you ultimately show your true colors, and I didn't know when I was on that roundabout on Old Street that I'd be going on this journey. I didn't know. But by the time I realized I was already like 3 years in. And I haven't really, and I've just kept, there's no other way for me other than forward. No,
yeah.
There's no other way.
So you mentioned therapy, like how's that helped you, as an example?
Yeah. I don't need anyone to tell me how good or bad I am anymore. I know me. When people criticize me now, I just understand that that's them projecting their own insecurities onto me. I don't need validation from anyone. I have it for myself. Amongst many other things, I've learned in therapy, but I've learned that. That's probably the key lesson. I've learned how to, just deal with these challenges in a really, how to deal with conflict, how to communicate my feelings, how to reconcile the past. And I believe that I'm a stronger, more balanced person that is now prepared to go back on my mission, I would say. Yeah. So I keep my therapy. I'll have that every week until the day I die.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, in some capacity.
So another thing you've done, which I know people say is like therapy, they say it's like doing 3 years therapy in 2 or 3 days, is ayahuasca. I think the whole psychedelics movement is interesting because a lot of my friends who are conservatives, who I never would have thought would think about things like that, have been, approaching me and talking about it. And I also know in the entrepreneurship space, it's becoming like a much wider conversation. Yeah. But I think it's what I really like about your journey with it, which we'll talk about now, is you said you don't see it as a drug, you don't see it as a medicine. You kind of have this unique experience of it. But I guess, 2 things maybe to start with. Tell us about your journey with ayahuasca. Why did you take it, and what happened to you?
Yeah, so in COVID, I started doing a lot of meditation through an app called Waking Up. Sam Harris, famous kind of guy that's well known for this stuff, and he has these really fascinating podcasts that talk about everything from spirituality, science of happiness, but he also talks about the effects of psychedelics on the brain when it comes to like a therapeutic state. And obviously there's a lot of investment going on into things like psilocybin research and stuff like that. So that really just interested me, right? It's an interesting subject, right? And there's a lot of people who clearly find that interesting. So that's kind of like this, where I started to understand that psychedelics aren't a drug. They are seen, there's a lot of research done in the 60s around Timothy Leary, and you start to understand the politics of why they were banned. You realize that they're deeply, deeply misunderstood things. And so that's kind of like my understanding of it. But then what was happening is I listened to a lot of podcasts. That's how I learned predominantly. We're all like that now because we're all busy. And a lot of things had happened where, like, someone would be talking about doing ayahuasca. A guy called Dan Murray Serta, he's another psychedelic. Do you remember that guy? No, I remember he was the first one on like Stephen Bartlett's podcast. He talked about it. And I remember just like hearing about that. I was like, oh, that's obviously going to pique my interest. What is this? And then I just kept on hearing it on other podcasts, and I didn't tell it to anyone, right?
Yeah.
Like, it never really come up in conversation. Anyway, so I was traveling around Greece on this tour in the summer of 2021 in COVID. And I was with a bunch of Americans, and one of my friends, Jake, at the end of this 2 weeks, we'd formed this bromance, and he at the end, and he's from Hollywood, California. He's from Denver, but he lives in Hollywood. He works in he's a Hollywood movie talent scout, works with talent. So he was there we were in Athens, and at the end of it, he goes, I'm going to Costa Rica with some of my friends to go to an ayahuasca retreat. Do you want to come? And, in sometimes in life when some Hollywood guy asks you to do that, you have 2 choices, and really you have to say yes. Right. Yeah. Okay. And especially I'd been hearing about it. So, and then like 9 months later, I was in Costa Rica with Jake and another guy called Andrew, and we went to this retreat. Basically, that's how it happened. That's how it,
Wow. Yeah. And then so obviously you went there. Tell us about your journey as well.
Yeah. So I think it's, I think what was really interesting, I was doing a lot of homework now beforehand, and you meet the shaman via like Zoom calls and stuff like that. A guy called Bruno. Hi Bruno, I'm sure. I'm sure I'll send it to these guys. So so I met him, and we talked about sort of what my intentions are, and I was doing a lot of research at this point, so the journey really began then. And for 9 months you're doing your research, and about a month before you have to go like hardcore clean, right? So no cigarettes, no sex, no wanking, literally
no alcohol,
nothing, no drugs, alcohol, nothing.
Certain foods you can't eat as well.
So I went full vegan. Maybe a bit of fish when I was, I think I remember having a tuna Pret baguette once, you know, and I was like, oh, naughty. But, you know, so, you know, very, very difficult month trying to be sober. Also trying to run a company and not being able to have a beer at the end of the day sometimes, that's tough, right? No WeWork beers. So yeah, I was doing all that. And, you know, also doing a lot of research, thinking about intentions, because you have to do a lot of sort of intentions about why you're going to do this. What is it? And yeah, no, I wanted to kind of really just come in, and I wanted to get a lot out of it, right? Because it's not cheap, you know, and it's obviously terrifying. You know, I was worried about things like, you know, what happens if I wouldn't be able to see my friends again because we'd be so different and the change would be forever. You know, a lot of those kind of fears and anxieties around it. But yeah, so I did a lot of preparation, got on a flight to Costa Rica via Miami. And yeah, I spent sort of 16. You know what was really funny? I had to choose a book in the airport when I was on my Audible, and I chose like Will Smith's biography. It just come out. And it was so funny because, you know, it was really cool because you obviously listen to him talking and stuff like that. And in the last few chapters, he talks about ayahuasca.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, so he's done loads of it. So you can see like the universe is aligning, right? Because you know, oh my God, why did I choose this? And it was like, you know, he talks about a lot about his relationship with his father, which, you know, is big for me as well. And yeah, and then suddenly you're talking about listening to him about his ayahuasca experiences, and you're just like, there you are, you're like, how? That's weird. How coincidental is that? So a lot of things started happening with the coincidences, right? And this is the stuff that just blows my mind more, as much as like the impact of the ceremonies. But like, so we get there, we go into get the rental car from the capital city of Costa Rica. I can't remember the name now. And, you know, we go into the middle of the volcano, the jungle. We're basically staying in this farm at the bottom of a volcano. It's barren, you know, it's Spartan. Spartan is the word, right? It's meant to be like that, you know? And you basically live with the family for a few days, and you're drinking teas all day long, fruits, and it's all that clean. Anyway, so we get there. Meet Bruno and his wife Kay, and Bruno's a shaman. And the first real coincidence that happens, right, was they give you this little pack, and in it had a notebook, and they had some handwritten message, and they give you this what the best way I could describe it is like this kind of Peruvian star sign or Mayan symbol. That's what it is. And they said your Mayan symbol is something called the saber. Right, and it's and then they gave me this kind of like Mayan symbol dictionary. Yeah. And basically what they did, they meditated over it and they decided that's my symbol. So there I am with this kind of Spanish dictionary and some Google Translate trying to figure out what they're talking about, right? And this tree, right, is this saber tree, right? Yeah. It's a tree that is grown in two countries. It grows in two countries, Peru in Cambodia. And if you think about the temples in Angkor Wat in Cambodia, the trees that grow through the brickwork, that's that tree. Okay. That tree is the inspiration for the tattoo on my back of the tree that grows through brickwork. Wow. Right. And that, for me, that means where there's a will, there's a way. You know, a bit of a pun on my name, but it's all about resilience and persistence and all the things about, you know, being a tough person.
And you got that tattoo way before the ceremony? Yeah.
Way before. I got that just before I started the academy, right, as like a little birthday present for me. And that actually became the Sass logo, or an evolved of it, right? So you remember it, it's the tree. And you're just like, bear in mind, like at this point, right, I've done no ayahuasca.
Yeah. So it's like the trip's already started.
The trip is already started. The journey started when in Greece, right? And this is what you start to realize, like that time construct is like, it's not time, right? It's that, you know, you realize at this point is like, this is something deeper. This is something where, this energy is clearly has been finding you, looking for you for a while, and you are just tapping into it. And I just, what are the odds? How many species of tree are there? How would they possibly know that? I didn't tell anyone that. The only people that know that are me and a tattoo artist in Deal called Ped. You know what I mean? Like, so you're just at this point, your mind's blown. So I went to Bruno. I was like, "How did you know?" And he's like, "Oh, it's just the universe." You know, this is. He wasn't surprised.
Yes.
You know, like, they're never surprised about anything like that. So so at that point, you know, you're like, right, this is obviously something really interesting. So we spend the afternoon after that doing some kind of like certain kind of therapies where you're like drawing and trying to understand things, and they're obviously trying to get you into a certain sort of mind frame.
Yeah.
And then as the evening comes, they take us to this. They actually took us into a house, like an Airbnb house, to actually do the ceremony, so it's a little bit more comfortable.
Okay.
And the first ceremony, so you do this twice over 3 days, right?
Yeah.
So this is the first night, first ceremony. I'm doing a lot of like setting intentions, writing a lot of, you're writing a lot of notes. I journaled the whole thing that I showed you earlier, right? And you're trying to set these intentions, and you're trying to sort of understand what you're trying to achieve from it. I did a lot of writing, and I think I settled on the intention. My intention was to love myself, you know? Because you could come back as like, oh, I want to fix things with my dad or relationships and stuff. And there was a lot of obviously that kind of thought process, as you can imagine. But ultimately, it really came down to I wanted to love myself. And so that was the intention. And as you start with that, there's a lot of meditation going on. And then when it's your turn to take the ayahuasca, what they do is there's two things they give you. Number one is they actually blow this tobacco dust up your nose.
Yeah.
And basically it's this pipe, and they stick it up that nose, and it makes your eyes stream. It's painful. It was like, what is this? And you're trying to do your best to like take it, but you've never experienced this in your life. You're obviously like shitting your pants a bit as well, because like this is like wild. Like I'm on the other side of the world.
Metaphorically, right? Because people do actually shit their pants on ayahuasca, but you're talking about metaphorically. Right?
Metaphorically, in this
just
case,
to confirm.
Yeah, this time, no, but metaphorically scared, right? You know, I was petrified, you know, but at the same time, like, you know, the courage was there. You know, I was being courageous. So, and then they give you this thing. It looks like a dirty shot of Jägermeister.
It tastes a lot worse than Jägermeister.
It tastes a lot worse than Jägermeister, yeah. So you take that, and then, you know, you're just sitting there meditating, and there's like all these candles around everywhere, and, you know, and nothing's really happening for like 40 minutes or so, and Jake goes up and he asks for another dose. So then, you know, like, I'm gonna have another dose kind of thing, you know, the ego kicking in there. And then and then that's when things started to get interesting. So it was all kind of like wavy and, you know, that kind of thing. But what happened is I was standing outside, and you purge a lot, right? So I started throwing up in the bucket, and I was basically, I had to come inside, and it was all very dizzying. And then basically I was throwing up more and more and purging more and more. And essentially, you know, it started getting really, really, really mad. Like, you had all these, like, when you're purging, what they do is they have these, like these fans of leaves and like this, like sage incensey type stuff. And the shaman's going, stuff like that. But what was to me feels like the smoke. It felt like these hands were all over me, these like very comforting feminine hands, which is referred to as like Mother Ayahuasca, right? Because there's it's all about like feminine energies, masculine and feminine energies, as I'm sure you're aware. So there was a lot of that, and it felt like all these hands were over me. So it was very, very terrifying. But what was this feminine energy? It was like, you're being looked after, and it was kind of like taking me on into this new plane. And what happened was like, I basically went into this world where like I was kind of like a bit like a Patronus in Harry Potter. You remember those things? Have you seen that? And you could see how the whole world was like connected, and all in this kind of like spiritually way. It was like this whole like mind-blowing experience where you could see how everything and anything was connected, you know, time and space and all that kind of stuff. And it was so overwhelming that I kind of like was like, oh my God, how am I ever gonna like come back from this kind of situation? Because it was so unbelievable. And then I kind of hid, right? So I was like, wrapped myself up in this blanket, and it got really tough, and I went into this void. And then I started screaming out for my dad. So dad passed away 10 years ago now, or so, 8-9 years ago. Anyway, so apparently I was screaming out for my dad like a little 3-year-old boy. I was going like, "Daddy, daddy, daddy, where are you? Where are you?" And, you know, I was crying out for him, like wailing. And yeah, that was obviously very, very intense, as you can imagine. But it was almost at the same time, it was like I was allowed to grieve for something that was obviously the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And that allowed I ended up having a conversation with my dad in this trip, and I was able to say the things that I couldn't have said to him when he passed away. I told him that I was going to look after my mum and my sisters. And yeah, it allowed me to kind of grieve, right? Like truly grieve and accept the fact my dad had gone. And that was a difficult relationship I had. It was love, but it was complex. And he's the man I idolized the most, and he was taken from us too early, right? So I was able to do that. And then as I came out of what was this kind of like purgatory, heaven-like place, I wake up and I've come out of my cocoon and I breathe and I go, and it was like I'd just been reborn, right? Like I'd just been born again. And it felt like I had died and come back to life. Like, I guess this is what they call an ego death, is what had happened, you know? And I was in part of this, it was almost like what was going around me. I saw Bruno, and before he'd mentioned, he's like, when you come out of it, you'll either see me as the angel or the devil. Because you know that shamanist stuff, it's the good and the bad, right? Is it. You know, there is no light without a shadow. And all these things he's saying are starting to come really poignant, because you can see it when you're under the influence of the ayahuasca, right? And, you know, and you start to really get the yin and the yang, or whatever you want to call it. And yeah, I saw him and I was like, oh, hello, nice to meet you. And I chose to see him as I remember actively choosing to see him as the angel, which was an interesting one. But he was there, and you know, sort of quiet conversations and stuff, but you're still like really floaty and very trippy and stuff. And yeah, I felt like I was like part of this new world of sorts, and it was almost like welcome to the club type feeling, but you've still got a long way to go. That was kind of like this thing. I'm not sure whose club, but that was the feeling, right? And then, you know, then the effects really start wearing off. And I have to say, I felt like a whole weight of the world had just been lifted off me. Like I'd done 30 years of therapy. Right? I had to face, I suppose, in looking at it, like that's why they say it's like 30 years, because therapy is addressing the issues, right? And this is the same kind of process, but so intense. You cannot avoid. I could not avoid the thing that was clearly the most painful thing that I, you know, wasn't addressing in the same way, which is losing the death of my father. Brutal, but necessary. And I just felt amazing afterwards. I felt like I'd had the whole world lifted off me. So that was the first ceremony. Then you do like a day of meditation and, you know, clean eating, and it's all like you're walking around the jungle looking at butterflies. I mean, it's the Costa Rican jungle. It's in itself, just watching like that ecosystem is truly fantastic. And from there you go into the second ceremony, right? And this was a very different time. So same thing with the dust and the ayahuasca and all that stuff, and did the second shot. And this time it was more like, if that was my like death and rebirth in the second one, this was like more like, now we're going to build you up as the man that you are destined to be. That was the feeling. That was my intention, right? Like I obviously have a very strong purpose in life. And my intention this time was to really build on these new lessons that I was learning, And yeah, this was different, right? So when the ayahuasca started taking taking effect, the guy was like banging the drum, like boom, 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 boom. And as I'm standing outside, the jungle has a glow at night.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen that before. It has this like blue aura about it, and it just felt like almost kind of like this kind of very tribal feeling that I am this like person that is like earning his right to be, you know, at this time a CEO of a multi-million-pound business, right? You know, like this kind of like very, very almost like, it was almost like leadership training in some weird ass way, you know, like it felt like that, like you are being like born. It was like this energy was palpable, and then the purging happened. And oh my God, I purged for like, and purging is like throwing up in a bucket for those that want to know what that is. About 3 hours. 3 hours of being sick in a bucket. And Jake, who I was doing this with, he was purging as well. And it was it got to a point where you were like, it was a bit like, you know, it was an endurance test. And you learn to love it. And it was painful. It was like someone was punching your stomach, right? And you were just there and you were like, like it was rough. It was rough, but I started to really, really enjoy it. Anyway, sorry, just before this ceremony, the second ceremony, just a little another sort of like non-trippy thing that was like unbelievable. This, we were sitting in this house, and this dog appeared, right? And the shaming, it's just there, and the dog's staring at me, no one else, right?
Yeah.
And the shaman goes, "This dog, he's here for you." I was like, okay, fine, you know. But he shut the door, didn't let the dog in because, you know, we're all about to do the ceremony. Anyway, so after the purging, so basically what happened was Kay, who's the shaman's wife, she was singing. So imagine this beautiful singing going on, and they kind of move the candles around, and there's like all these like, you know, all this stuff. And it's the most beautiful singing you've ever heard in your life. And obviously it's all completely enhanced by the fact you're under the influence of ayahuasca. And it was just the most beautiful, soulful singing that kind of clearly had a lot of pain in it, and a lot of it was just so beautiful. And you're such a ball of emotions because you've been throwing up for like 3 hours, and the hallucinogens going. And then suddenly, whilst I'm trying to meditate, right? At the same time, I was just going through it. And then suddenly it was like, boom. And I achieved what I imagine the Buddhists would call enlightenment, where I achieved this state of Zen, where like I am completely, my heart and my head and my body and my soul, or the chakras as they would call it, were completely aligned. And I was free of all my worries and my woes and all the million thoughts that go in my head every day. I didn't have that anymore. And I achieved what I believe was enlightenment, and it was so visual, right? At the same time, it's so visual. And it was just, when I read the notes in my diary this morning before coming in, the word I used was a privilege. I honestly felt privileged to have experienced something that many wouldn't even think to try, let alone have the balls to do, kind of thing. And it was just like all this work, this journey, this 9-month journey of quite a lot of sacrifice and effort, and the mental toughness to process all that stuff. And then this is the reward, this rewarding feeling that I have transformed of sorts, you know. Anyway, as I'm in this enlightenment thing, like tears are still streaming down my face because it's so beautiful, you know, the emotions are so high. This dog broke into the house somehow and sat by me and like licked where my heart chakra is, and apparently I have a blockage in my heart chakra, if you could believe that, you know, like that kind of stuff. And it was just very clear that this dog was, I love dogs, by the way. Like, you know, everyone that knows me on LinkedIn knows I love to talk about Crumble, my dog. But I felt like this dog, basically, like he said, Bruno was like, he's come for you. And the dog didn't see anyone else. The dog just sat with me. I felt like it was like some kind of guardian angel type spirit, you know?
Yeah.
And it was beautiful. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed, you know, and experienced. And especially when you're so purpose driven like myself, where you know, I do this stuff, this entrepreneur journey, I now do it to help others, not myself. It just felt like I said, this validation, this redemption, this whatever those feelings of the past had kind of been put to bed in some kind of way. And I am now ready to go on the next stage of the journey.
Yeah. I think we've spoken about ayahuasca a few times on the show. And one of the things is you can take ayahuasca and, as you said, you had very good intentions going into it, which a lot of people don't. But even if you've got the right intentions, you have an incredible ceremony. And I've been through the same thing as you. And then you feel great, but maybe after 3 weeks, 1 month, 3 months, whatever it is, that feeling goes away. Mm-hmm. So I guess, how did you then integrate the learnings, obviously the conversations with your dad, the, you know, finding your purpose, all that stuff? How have you kept some of those learnings with you going forward? Because I think that's a big thing. People take ayahuasca and then years later they're like, oh, it was great, but you know, my life hasn't changed. So how did you ensure it had a long-term positive effect on you? I
think first things first, I've been incredibly open about doing it. And, you know, I've told this story to many people before. I mean, this is the first time on a podcast, frankly. But, you know, I told my employees that I did it. I wanted to normalize this as much as possible because it's very clear that the benefits that this can deliver therapeutically to, I imagine, people with PTSD. You could see how this could really, really help people. So I think that's one thing that I've done is like pass the information on. That's helped me like get people to understand it. I agree with you though. It took me, I thought a year later, I was like, oh no, I don't think I'll need to do this again. But now I'm nearly like, 2 years, maybe longer now. Gosh, yeah, it probably is, right? I actually now feel aligned with you. Actually, I think I'm probably ready to go back and do it again. And plan it, you know, because you have to plan it for a year, right? Like 9 months, you know, you can't just pop to Costa Rica or whatever. So, but integration was hard back because, you know, and it's the same when you go traveling or whatever and you come back to the rat race, this world that we're in, the incredibly high levels of consumerism that we are exposed to. But
you could argue traveling, I'll call out a lot of travelers who think there's a lot of hypocrisy with the traveler space because they're like, oh, we're not consumption, blah, 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 and they actually consume more than anyone else and they're traveling around the world and they're doing this. And I think there's a lot of hypocrisy in that space, right?
Yeah.
And same in the ayahuasca space as well, right?
There are always contradictions in life, right? And of course, but I'd like to think as a traveler, like I like to go sort of slightly more on the trodden path, so to speak, right? But you know, like just when you're in those worlds and then you come back and then you're exposed to like, you know, like consumerism stuff, it's really hard to just, oh my God. But then, you know, it's very hard to retain those lessons. It's really hard. Yeah. And, you know, I got sucked into having to deal with the business stuff. You know, we were in trouble. I had to, you know, we had revenue numbers on our heads. We would, you know, I think at the same time I had to do 400 grand's worth of business when I came back, you know, by Christmas or something crazy. Like, so it was straight back into so it.
This, I thought you did it after SAS Leads.
No. I did it during SAS Leads.
Oh, you did it during SAS Leads, okay.
Yeah.
So I guess a better question to ask then is, okay, you had this amazing experience. SAS Leads eventually goes to shit. Mm-hmm. Were there things that like you learned during the ayahuasca ceremony that helped you when like, you know, SAS Leads was going under?
Yeah, like the validation in myself, like, you know, that's not just the therapy, that was also the ayahuasca. I mean, you could argue it's the same, but like I said, I had a lot of people questioning my integrity. Yeah. You know, and when it comes down to it, your reputation is everything in this game. But I was able to better than ever before to believe in myself, you know. When I brought in a lot of the people that I'm referring to from SAS Leads, I was young, inexperienced, didn't know what I'm talking to. And by the time it all fell apart, I entirely different person. right? And whilst I take accountability for my action, for the business failing, like I was also able to correctly assign accountability onto others without it, and know that. And I think that was certainly part of the ayahuasca link for sure. I've also like made some really great friends through that process, like my buddy Jake in the US, you know, and there's some of the things that I think I carry with me is like, you know, the people and the connections that I've got through that. Yeah. I'm not saying that's helped me with the business, but it's just it's certainly something I take with me as well. Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to talk about, so leading up to the ceremony, you were seeing these like signs almost from the universe, right?
Yep.
Obviously you mentioned the one with the tree,
yep.
But even the fact that it wasn't like, you eventually did loads of research on ayahuasca, but before your friend is like, okay, I'm going to do this ayahuasca ceremony, and it feels like you're almost trusting like gut feeling, intuition, that like, this is me getting a sign from the universe.
Yes. Absolutely.
And I think a lot of people, because I'm sure you've got a lot of friends as well who are like, oh, I want to go traveling. I want to go and live abroad. I want to start my business. But there's a lot of fear. And I feel like sometimes especially in the West, we're too logical and we don't trust a lot of like intuition and gut feeling.
Yeah.
So I guess, do you think was that part of the process as well? There's that like intuition side of it. And I guess, has that also helped you like with your business as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Like, so, you know, the universe has these energies. It's clear that we are connected by forces that, you know, conventional science or wisdom can't really explain. And some may call it God.
Yeah.
Religion certainly would call it God, right? You know, but I am absolutely certain now there are things at play that we can't see. But you can channel them, right?
Yeah.
You can absolutely channel them. And something about this entrepreneurship journey is like, I felt I had no choice other than to go out my own.
Yeah.
Because the system around me wasn't working for me. And in that time, by just going out there, I've come up with like this amazing idea for Merit, which we'll talk about later, etc. But it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't taken that first step, right? That first bravery. But I had no idea what I was doing. None. But now I do, because I did that first step. And the universe definitely rewards like taking risk, making good actions, but it does it in a way that when you learn to channel it, it also is random.
Yeah,
it's random, right? Like, but if I hadn't have taken all those steps and done the right things and acted in a certain way, there are certain relationships I have, business and personal relationships, that just wouldn't exist if I hadn't have taken those first steps. Right. Yeah. Like, if I hadn't taken those first steps to take that business on Austria Roundabout, there's no way I would be telling you about my crazy journey to Costa Rica. Right. It's just the way it works. Yeah. All connected. Everything is connected. Energy is connected. And everyone's got a different way of explaining it.
Yeah.
Religion. There's a book called The Secret. You know, that's very pop culture-y.
Yeah.
But
law of attraction.
Law of attraction kind of stuff. Yeah. You know, it's, you know, everyone's got a way of explaining it, but I know that the more I put into this world, the more I get out of it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think about all my amazing connections. You're one of them. Yeah, I wouldn't know you if I hadn't done
this. Be sitting here,
yeah. Yeah, and it's fascinating, isn't it? I find that really kind of brings up, like, you know, what is that? You know, is it God? Is it just energy? Is it, you know, that kind of stuff? But whatever it is, I certainly believe in it. And I'm really experiencing it now, like, really great example of like some of the tough decisions at the time. So there was this one customer that we were going to could have saved SAS Leads Academy, right? And we'd been through all the due diligence, procurement processes and everything else like that. And what had happened was I had to basically tell them, I had to make the decision to either go and do that deal or shut the company down and tell them not to do it, which would effectively kill the company.
Yeah.
And you know, that's a really big call to make.
Yeah.
Really, really, really big call to make. And I made the right call, and, you know, which was to say no, because the chances of us succeeding was slim. But we could have survived. Hindsight, obviously, the market went to shit, and we would have.
You did the right thing.
You know, was the right call anyway. But what's amazing now is that now my first customer is that person that I said, hey, don't go with us because we're going to go down. But I killed the company. But I didn't know that my first customer of the new business was going to be the last customer I met the person for like 45 minutes.
Well, I guess because you acted with integrity at the time. You weren't selling them something you knew wasn't going to work. They trusted you, right? When it came to this. No,
all comes down to integrity.
Yeah.
And hence why I was so upset when my integrity was put into question. Because it ultimately, you know, if you think about in developing countries, right, there's so much corruption, right? You can't, a contract's worth crap there. It's not worth anything. The only thing you have is your word in those worlds. And it's so true. It's all we've got ultimately when it comes down to it. Like, contracts can be broken, right? But you go and break a contract, your integrity is gone. But you could, you know, a handshake, you know, it's very different, right? And that's all you have at the end of the day. And I protected it. But at the same time, this is what I mean about the random. There's still no way that I would now be working with that customer. That was a random event, right? And that's all because you put good into the universe. Good comes out. 100%. Definitely.
So last topic. Obviously, a lot of people listening to this would be like, okay, you had this business, you were super stressed, you went through mental health problems, even though you had this ayahuasca trip that helped you. They maybe think there's no way he's going to go do it again, right? But you're currently in the process, literally at the moment, as you said, you're about to get your first client with Merit. Why the hell would you go into entrepreneurship again after all the pain you went through last time?
Yeah, so I talked about purpose, right? And through this journey, I've learned one thing is that I have a purpose on this earth, and my purpose is to help as many people as I can get access to education and a proper career. And what I will deem as success in my life is when I can tell you a story of how someone from a developing country can get a job in a field like sales, for example, but they don't have to move to the UK or Silicon Valley or whatever. They can do that from their village in India or wherever, and they can increase the GDP of their own country, right? And they can take those skills that they've got and pump it back into their economy to make their living standards a better place. That's why I am on this earth, is to do that. So that is such a very big thing. The only way to do that is obviously through setting up my own business again. So that's what we're going to be doing at Merit, is driving careers, access to jobs and opportunities in skills-based places, skills-based roles. So starting with sales, because that's what I know. But I want to create a university that enables people to do just that. And it's painful. It's going to suck. It is painful now. I'm bootstrapping. I'm having to raise money. I'm having to put my entire livelihood on the line. I'm having to go through, process all this trauma properly and do it all again. But that is, I think it's important to understand that drive, that ambition, that purpose is so strong in me that I'm prepared to put it all on the line again. And I'll probably do it again if I fail. And I think that's why I'm an entrepreneur.
What advice would you give to Will Koning of, you know, maybe before you had the ayahuasca journey, and you've stressed out with various things, or even just after the business failed, right? I guess what have you learned in the last 2 years that you're going to be taking forward? So one, for yourself, but two, you know, for anyone else listening.
Believe in yourself. You're doing the right thing. Keep going. But focus. Just focus on doing it. That's it. You'll be fine. Slow down 5%. But not much lower. Nice. Yeah. We'll put your LinkedIn, we'll put the Merit website. Any other resources you want us to put in the show notes for people? Yeah, check out Merit. We're doing really cool stuff. Building a waitlist now. Be really helpful if you can all sign up. Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for coming on. Great to finally have been on here. Yeah. Subscribe to us across all the podcast platforms and on YouTube, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Cosmic Bridge.